Hey guys, gonna talk about chapter 7.1 today, which has two subsections, which are 7.1 and 7.2, or 7.1.1 and 7.1.2, the need for responsible judgment and computer models. And this whole section is kind of about evaluating information. So 7.1.1 talks about the need for responsible judgment. There's a lot of false information online. The the book likes to use Wikipedia as an example for this, and how the wisdom of the crowd can kind of combat some of this misleading information. There's a lot of fake news, video manipulation, and identity theft that happens online now. This isn't an issue that's really created by the internet, but it's an issue that's definitely magnified by the internet. Wikipedia is a example the book likes to use of this. It's not like traditional encyclopedias. It's kind of a little bit more subjective because just the premise of Wikipedia is that anybody can kind of collaborate on it and contribute in the way they want to. It's not completely accurate and objective like most encyclopedias are traditionally thought of to be. But this idea is kind of assisted by the wisdom of the crowd. So since there's so many people contributing and looking at Wikipedia all the time, Wikipedia articles, the articles can kind of be shaped and molded into something that's a lot more accurate than if just a couple people contributed to it. So the wisdom of the crowd can be applied to things like questions online, where you'll have like a Yahoo Answers page that has like 20 answers, and some of the answers will be upvoted a lot more than the other ones, and those ones are generally a lot more reliable than the ones that are downvoted or just not voted on at all. But this wisdom of the crowd idea can lead to magnified problems of unreliable information, and crowds generate good answers to like certain kinds of questions, like questions that have a definite answer, such as the jelly beans in the jar example that we talked about in class. The book goes into a lot more depth on this than I am right now, just because of a time constraint. So 7.1.2 dives into computer models and how we need to be able to evaluate models and the importance of models, and how these models can be used for things like climate change. The book talks in depth about modeling climates. So the reason models are important is because we have this abundance of data, right? We have so much data, and we need to figure out a way to turn it into something readable, something usable, something a lot more abstracted than the current state of just a dump of data, a cluster of data. And models help us do that because they give us a visual representation of just a bunch of numbers, right? So this can be applied to climate change. The issue with climate change is there is a large amount of known data, but there is also a large amount of unknown data. This leads to a lot of assumptions being made, and this can affect the accuracy of the models, which is why there are a variety of different models used for evaluating climates. The book wants to talk about how accurate these climate models are. Near the end of the chapter, it kind of talks about how the climate models are generally selected based on how much they agree with the other models. So if there's a piece of information that is taken out of a model, and the same piece of information is also taken out of many of the other climate models that are used, it is thought of as a more reliable piece of information rather than a piece of information that you taken out of the model that doesn't agree with all the other models. So that's usually how climate scientists like to select information that's taken out of these models. These aren't always the most accurate, even when they do all agree, but scientists generally look into how those like why they won't be accurate or how they match up to the real world and things like that. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Colin Hoffman, and I'm presenting my portion of Chapter 7 for Group 7, The Digital Divide. So the term the digital divide refers to the fact that about half the population enjoys the use of modern information technology and the other half do not. So throughout this presentation, we'll be talking about how we're trying to bridge the divide that goes on in the digital world. So the focus on bridging the divide has changed between these groups over time. Originally it started with people of different income levels and demographics. Then it switched over to those who had broadband and those that were living without it. And then it was between developed countries and poor countries. Computer access has had a lot to do with this divide that's been going on. And the widespread use of them now is becoming much more prevalent and is helping to bridge this divide. Gender gap was a real problem in the early 90s, but only about 10% of the .NET users being women. But by 1997, the gender gap had almost vanished. Although this was a major accomplishment, a lot of other gaps still remain, especially those within the different demographic groups. Black and Hispanic households were about half as likely as the general population to own a computer at this point in time. Cost was another major factor. In 1991, about 22% of the households owned a computer, but by 2001, about 84% of the households with children in them, middle school and up, so anyone middle school, high school, college, had internet access. This directly correlated to the thought of how these accesses to these items would affect the children and their futures, and the families started to adjust their spending accordingly so that they would be properly equipped with everything they needed to learn. A lot of people saw this as well, not just the families that had these children, and contributed to the spread of computers, that being different individuals, businesses, community organizations, foundations, government programs, and so forth. Because of these strides, by 2000, 98% of high school students had access to the internet. And groups with low access in the earlier years began to catch up. The gap within these races had finally began to disappear. That's between internet access and computers as a whole. All the gaps started to kind of close down around the 2000s. By this time in the early 2000s, again, showing that they have kind of transitioned over. The haves and the have-nots, which were originally in that part of that divide where people wanted to have this technology and then the others that did not want to have this technology, started to become the haves and have-laters, because they're kind of realizing now that technology is going to be part of their lives, and whether they want to have it now or have it later, it's going to be something they're just generally going to adapt to. By 2011, the FCC approved a program to extend the broadband service to rural areas of the United States, and companies like Best Buy, Microsoft, America's Promise Alliance, and the United Way, among many others, provide digital literacy training. Another thing that was studied was how many people created online content. This was shown that people of a higher socioeconomical status were more likely to create online content, but something that was brought up when they were studying that was that they related creating online content to actually just writing literature, and how a very small percentage of the people even wrote books and articles before the internet. So studying this in general was something that should be brought up upon, but at the end of the day, even without the internet, there was still a huge divide. Now, in modern day, there's about 2 million people worldwide that use the internet every day. That's impressive, right? But think about the other 5 million people that are left that don't use it. The lack of internet access to the rest of the world has the same effects as the lack of healthcare, education, and so on. Because the internet is such a powerful tool, especially in our daily lives, going without it, you can see how that could make a divide, and trying to bridge that so that everyone's on an equal playing field is very important. So to recap, we've come a long way in the distribution of technology and the availability of it, but that's only part of the battle. We need to make sure that the resources are available. We need to make sure that the education and training are available, because you can have as many resources as you want, but if there's nothing to tell people how to use it, or how to train them on how to make it more effective, the resources pretty much go unused. We also need to make sure that there's a return to the value of using and learning these technologies, because otherwise no one's going to want to learn how to use them, no one's going to want them to be available, because there's going to be other things that are going to have a higher return. And then also, you have to think about the investment that it costs to make all the resources and training available. There needs to be something that makes all that worth it. So that's kind of the section 7.2, bridging the digital divide. And that's all there is to it.
The section 7.3.1, titled Criticisms of Computing Technologies, begins with a preface that although the book has discussed many issues with technology so far, it is implied that these technologies are positive and bring us many benefits. This is important since the contents of the section are, as the title suggests, opposing views to the overwhelming majority who embrace and support technology and advancements in these fields. For all of us who use technology, addressing and fixing the risks that are presented is the more appropriate response to these adversities. But this section describes people who reject that computing technology as a positive development altogether. Neil Postman is referenced as he states that voting, shopping, banking, and getting information at home online is a catastrophe, quote unquote, since it leads to isolation from neighbors and a general disconnect. More perspectives like this are discussed in this section, like technology creating a void of depth in our lives. These anti-technology ideas are not new. The reading covers the original opposition to technological development, the Luddites, who originated in England in the early 1800s in response to the Industrial Revolution. The term Luddite can still be used for any who oppose technology and development in technological progress, sometimes called Neo-Luddites for a modern branding. These Neo-Luddites are of the opinion that the issues with technology, many of which we have discussed, are not solvable or don't have valuable trade-offs if they are solvable. The reading lists the following specific criticisms from the Luddites. Computers cause massive unemployment and de-skilling of jobs. Sweatshop labor is involved in their manufacture, quote unquote. Computers manufacture needs. That is, we use them just because they are there, not because they satisfy real needs. Computers cause social inequity. Computers cause social disintegration. They are dehumanizing. They weaken communities and lead to isolation of people from each other. Computers separate humans from nature and destroy the environment. Computers benefit big business and big government most. Use of computers in schools thwarts development of social skills, human values, and intellectual skills in children. They create an ominous uniformity of knowledge, consistent with corporate values. Computers do little or nothing to solve real human problems. For example, Neil Postman, in response to claims of the benefits of access to information, argues that if families break up, children are mistreated, crime terrorizes the city, education is impotent, it does not happen because of inadequate information, quote unquote. This section proceeds to explain how some of these claims are unfair, such as the working conditions being better than they were in the Industrial Revolution, the unemployment issue being mostly a non-factor in terms of causation linked to technology, and so on. More Neo-Luddites are quoted as example to this anti-technological standpoint, such as Sven Burkertz, who is stated that if he lived in 1900, he would probably have opposed the telephone. The argument between technology enthusiasts and critics come from the same history and societies, the reading states, and there is a fundamental difference between the two camps. I quote, "It is more than the difference between seeing a glass as half full or half empty. The difference seems to be one of contrasting views about what should be in the glass. Technology advocates see the glass being filled with what technology brings to our societies, and Luddites see the glass being originally full and emptying with these new developments." The views are grounded in what is the right way to live and progress as humans, and in the next section, the views are further explored.
Luddites have negative views of capitalism, business, markets, consumer products, factories, and modern forms of work. They instead see work in factories, large offices, and businesses as dehumanizing, dreary, and bad for the health of the workers. They also view the clock as an invention that was made just so the employers can devote themselves to accumulation of money, seeing as they can record as much time as they want, and the longer time they spend, the more money they earn. Luddites view technology also as a means to eliminate the jobs, which will reduce costs of production, which suggests massive unemployments, profits for capitalists, and a proper life for most workers. So they do not want most workers to basically have their own life. They want them to make the money, and they think that technology is basically pulling away the income of the workers. And then overall, the Luddites view these advantages as a negative, basically due to the whole capitalists making their own money and profit by using technology. Next, a common criticism of capitalism, as far as determining whether or not technology is needed, is that it survives by convincing us to buy products we do not need. Again, the Luddites argue that technology causes production of things we do not need. A big question that we can ask is, do we as a society need a portable computer? And generally speaking, a lot of people say no, since a portable computer is the reason why we buy things we do not need. A lot of people show with their purchases that they want a computer, not that they need one. Computers, however, have been used by many environmental and anti-technology groups. One example is the editor of Wild Earth, who was discovered using a computer after multiple articles disowning computers, the web, and many other technological advances. In the end, the argument that capitalists or technologies manipulate people to buy things they do not want displays a low view of the judgment and autonomy of ordinary people. The Luddite view of life puts little value on modern comforts and convenience, or on the availability of large variety of goods and services. Next, the Luddites argue technology has made no improvements in life. Or better yet, they think the improvements of life that they made was of very little importance. They say that these individual virtues that may not even be virtues in the first place, we don't even need those technologies, seeing as that's what they think of those virtues. There is actually a quote-unquote philosopher, I'm going to say. His name is Jerry Mander. He stated to support the argument, saying that thousands of generations of humans got along without computers, suggesting that we could do just fine without them as well. It's just that his objection is that there's no good technology out there. So while you listen to people argue about nature, humanity, or technology, you should also realize that these conflicts are just conflicts between people with different viewpoints. They're not necessarily real conflicts, it's just their own views. While their views aren't the best, or you don't have to agree upon their views, it's just whatever views they come up with to oppress the opposing viewpoint. And then lastly, there have been many accomplishments of these technologies, and a lot of them are easy to miss, especially when they're changing the quality of life. And seeing as there's many changes going on in the world, there are many times where you're going to miss it just because there's a lot to handle out there. Our life expectancy has gone up. Parents no longer have to endure deaths of their children. All sorts of deadly diseases like polio, smallpox are mostly gone due to vaccines. Don't forget to vaccinate. And at work, during travel, and by accidents, like traveling to work and having an accident has declined drastically. There are less accidents out there now. Americans can now spend less on food due to the agricultural breakthrough. The amount of crop yield in the world has increased by millions and millions. There's less space being taken up by growing these crops by basically factory farming. and the benefits of telecommunication and information technology are enormous in developing countries. The internet revolution is truly a relevant and big thing in both the high-tech world and developing countries.
Hello, this is Anthony Coleman, and I am presenting section 7.4, and this is making decisions about technology. First section, 7.41, are questions. Can a society choose to have a certain specific desirable modern inventions while prohibiting whole technologies? 2. How well can we predict the consequences of new technology or application? 3. Who would make the decisions? 4. How finally can we make decisions about acceptable and unacceptable technologies? 7.42. The difficulty of prediction. First, it is difficult to predict the use of technologies because technologies developed for a particular purpose is often used for other useful purposes. For example, the internet was designed just for communication between computer systems and other computers, but then it became used for other purposes like online shopping and accessing media content like movies or online books. Another example, the personal computer. The personal computer was designed for computations like the spreadsheet and producing Word documents like Microsoft Word, but is now used for entertainment purposes, communication, and the distribution of knowledge. Computer scientist Peter Dunning suggests the reason for people adopting existing technologies for new practices is because it allows for more choices for actions and relationships. The other difficulty of prediction is that prominent experts have been widely inaccurate about making predictions about technologies. For example, Joseph Weizenbaum, a prominent computer scientist from the 1970s, made several inaccurate arguments against the development of speech recognition systems. Weizenbaum stated only the largest possible computers will ever be able to manage it. But in reality, speech recognition is now used in smartphones. Weizenbaum also made the argument a speech recognition machine is bound to be enormously expensive, and that only governments and possibly a very large corporation will therefore be able to afford it. But in reality, millions of people now own devices that use speech recognition software like smartphones. However, Weizenbaum also opposed the use of speech recognition systems because he felt that the technology could be abused through the creation of more advanced military weapons and wiretapping. His claims raises concern of developing technologies that could harm the human race. And it raises the question, should we develop technology that could potentially threaten the safety of the human population or potentially the survival of the human race? Intelligent machines and superintelligent humans, or the end of the human race. Intelligent machines are theorized robots / androids that are as intelligent or more intelligent than humans or computer devices that increases human intelligence to superhuman levels. Thanks to advances in artificial intelligence, the rise of intelligent machines is a conceivable reality within our lifetimes. Prominent technologists anticipate the rise of intelligent machines. And there are potential benefits to intelligent machines. One is that it can give humans advanced mental powers through brain implants and computer brain interfaces. The second is brain implants can be used to prevent strokes or other brain ailments. However, the concern is that some human superintelligent machine hybrid or a superintelligent robot could far surpass basic human intelligence, that it would begin to compete with regular humans and attempt to wipe out the human race. Responding to the threat of intelligent machines, multiple solutions have been proposed to deal with the potential rise of intelligent machines and intelligent machine software. Bill Joy, a co-founder of Sun Microsystems, proposed limiting the production of intelligent machine technologies. However, Joy's idea has been criticized because the touted benefits of intelligent machines aren't and won't be widely available to the human race. Another proposed solution is to develop protections to prevent this technology from getting out of control. However, critics such as Bill Joy himself believe that such shields are infeasible and that it cannot be developed in time.